Number 15, we are graphing this quadratic in standard form. When we graph quadratics in standard form, we make a table, and we find the beginning of our table by finding the vertex first, right? So we find that vertex, the middle of this table, by doing negative b over 2a. So we're going to look at our original equation. A equals 1, b equals 6, c is 5, we just don't need it, right? So negative b over 2a. So that's going to be a negative 6 over 2, which means the middle of our table is going to be negative 3. We then want to count up and down. So we have a negative 4, negative 5, negative 2, negative 1. And then we're going to either, you can do it by hand, but I think we'd all prefer to just plug in our calculators to find these corresponding output values. So I'm taking this equation and I'm going to plug each of these values in for both of the x's. So I'm going to say negative 5 squared. Make sure that negative 5 is in parentheses before you square it. Plus 6 times negative 5 plus 5. That gives me an output of 0. Then I'm going to plug in negative 4. So you can just up an arrow over. That gives me a negative 3. Then I'm going to plug in negative 3. So negative 4. Now, if we remember our rules, this is symmetric, so we better get that negative 3 out, which we do, right? And we better get a 0 out on the last one because quadratics are symmetric, and we picked the vertex in the middle so that we would see those symmetric points. So if I go to graph this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm plotting the point negative 5, comma 0, negative 4, negative 3, negative 3, negative 4, negative 2, negative 3, and negative 1, 0. There's our quadratic. Number 16 is the same idea. So we are in standard form, so we need to start by doing negative b over 2a. If you watch this video, I am telling you there will not be one this difficult on your test. Okay, so if we plug this in, b is negative 3. So b is negative 3. The negative of negative 3 is positive 3 over 2 times a, which is negative 1. So 3 divided by negative 2. If you need to use a calculator, you can. It's right. Oh, a negative 2, so it's a negative 1.5. Now, some of us have been struggling with finding the correct point values once we get here. So if you need to, think about this on a number line. Right, negative 1.5 is here. I prefer to jump 1.5 so that it's a little bit easier for me to graph. So I'm going to go to 0 and negative 3. And then I go to 1 and negative 4. But you might choose points slightly differently as long as you're making that same amount of jump. And then we'll start plugging values in. Now, when we plug this in, negative and then parenthesis, negative 4, close parenthesis squared, minus 3 times negative 4 plus 2. Then we'll plug in negative 3, which gives us a 2. I'm going to skip down to the 0 for just a minute and the 1, just to make sure it's a little bit easier to substitute in there. So there's my negative 2, which it should be. This one better be a 2 when I plug in 0. Good, right? Because that negative 1.5 is a little bit longer to plug in. So negative and then parenthesis, negative 1.5. Close parenthesis squared, minus 3 times negative 1.5 plus 2. You get a 4.25. So we'll have negative 4, negative 2, negative 3, positive 2, negative 1.5, positive 4, and then a little bit more. 0, 2, 1, negative 2. And this should be a parabola opening down because a is negative 1. Okay, so there's our graph there. Number 17 is exponential. So we know on this exponential, we should always sort of be thinking about what our asymptote is, right? What's that number that's being added or subtracted. And on here, we don't see anything at all, right? When we don't see anything at all, we know that that value is then 0. So at 0, right, we have that line we can't cross. And then we said for exponentials, we're just picking easy numbers to plug in. We know that exponentials get big really fast, so we're going to do a -1, 0, 1, and 2. All right, so again, we can use our calculator, so negative and then parenthesis, -1, close parenthesis, up caret -1, right? I'm plugging -1 in for x. That gives me out a 1. Oh, I didn't type that in right. That's a -2. Let's try that again. I did this as my -1. Silly me. Negative parenthesis 2, close parenthesis, up caret -1. Can't talk and write at the same time. So that's a 1/2 or a 0.5, either way. Okay, it's negative. So then we'll do 0. Man, my brain is not talking right. So we're putting 0 in for the x, not for the 2. In for the x. Okay, that's going to give us a -1. Then we'll put in a 1. And then we'll put in a 2. Okay, so we'll go to graph these values. -1, -1/2. 0, -1. 1, -2. 2, -4. Okay, so we know that this is a swoop shape, so that's showing us our downhill where we can't cross 0. So we're coming across here, and then we are swooping down.